Hailing from the backwoods of New Jersey, welcome to the Jersey Guys Music Podcast, where we feature in-depth music discussions and interviews with special guests from the worlds of hard rock, heavy metal, and AOR music. So settle in and crank it up. Now, here are your hosts, the Jersey Guys themselves, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jersey Guys podcast. I'm Mark Ballo here with my co-host Tom Coyne, and today we've got special guest Rick Pierce from the bands Q5, Nightshade, TKO, and currently the Rick Pierce Group. Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, great to be with you guys. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, I wanted to start off with the thing you've got currently going on, which is the Rick Pierce Group. We talked about it a little bit before we started, but can you tell us about the Rick Pierce Group? I know so far there's been 4 singles that you've released digitally, but talk about those, talk about when it started and when we can expect a brand new album from you.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Well, the Rick Pierce Group was basically started as a songwriting collaboration between myself and Floyd Rose, who, while not a member of the group, he and I were bandmates in the group Q5. Floyd has continued writing songs, and we kind of reacquainted with each other. It had been over 20 years since we had really hung out in the days of Q5, and we started a songwriting collaboration while I was still actually a member of Q5, which reformed in 2013. Floyd and I started writing songs at that point, and I had a falling out with the singer in Q5 in 2017, and Floyd said, well, why don't you come down here? I was up here in Seattle. He was down in San Diego. Why don't you come down here and we'll finish up those songs we were working on. And that was the start of Rick Pierce Group. We started basically as a studio project of Floyd and I collaborating on tunes down at Floyd's studio in San Diego. And we acquired musicians through both of our contacts. And it slowly morphed into a band. That's when COVID happened, and it turned into one of those kind of COVID era projects where it was a long distance thing. Our singer, Chris James, is Floyd's discovery, and he's down in San Diego, and we recorded him down there. The bass and drums is mild rhythm section. It's Frankie Rongo from New Jersey. Hey. Who's been my drummer in Nightshade and in Q5 over many, many years. Frankie and Izzy Riem is my bass player. He and I toured with the Ronnie Monroe project. Ronnie was the singer for Metal Church. Sure. And Izzy and I toured with Ronnie, and that's how I knew Izzy. We roomed together and found ourselves really simpatico. So it all we called our friends. Floyd knew Chris, I knew Izzy and Frankie, and it all came together. From there, we recorded a lot of the tracks down in Floyd's studio in San Diego, but I have to record drums and bass up here in Seattle in an actual studio. So we kind of blended all together, and we got signed by Golden Robot in 2020. Their emphasis has been on singles, though, which has been a bit of a source of frustration. But we've had 4 singles out now, and so it's time to get the album out.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you that because I see the 4 singles up there on all the streaming platforms and, you know, dating from 2020 up till current. And I was just wondering, you know, what's going on here?
Right.
I mean, I guess the Golden Robot thing, how did you hook up with them?
It was actually fairly random that we heard about them. We did, it was still during Q5 times, and I did an interview with KK Downing's website, and one of their writers, Kimo Hatari, mentioned Golden Robot. I'd never heard of him, but then he did mention, and Tom and I were talking about this before we went on air, about John Sykes.
Yes,
And
yeah, I was going to say, I know he was supposedly touted with having an album.
Golden Robot, never heard of him, but they got John Sykes. If they're good enough
yeah.
for that, then apparently that kind of fell flat. But that was how I found out about him, and I approached him, and they virtually signed us on the spot when I showed him the songs that Floyd and I had been working on.
Oh, okay, nice. So then of course you said COVID hit and things kind of the world stopped, right?
Right, and then it became a studio project. Mm. When and now it's a matter of trying to get it back onto into a live touring proposition.
Okay, so when do you think you think you said sometime maybe early part of 25 we may see an album?
Yeah, first of the year I'm looking to have the album, and I'm already talking to promoters in Europe, which is where they where they know who we are.
Right, gotcha.
Mainly from Q5 and Nightshade.
Right. Well, this guy over to my right here, he's a big Q5 Nightshade fan, so I know he's gonna kind of pick up and ask you some questions about that. So we'll go back to the early days for you at this point.
We'll do a deep dive.
Okay, Tom.
If you could tell us a little bit about your involvement with TKO and how that came about, and then we'll segue into Q5.
Sure. But talking about TKO, we're going way back in time, because it indirectly it started when the basis of TKO was a bunch of guys in Yakima, Washington. It's in eastern Washington, a smaller town and on an Indian reservation that most of the people in TKO came from. It was the singer Brad Sinsel and I were in bands, and then eventually we brought in Evan Sheely and Bill Durham, who were also people that we grew up with in Yakima. But the roundabout way that we got together was I was in Seattle already. I was attending the University of Washington, and I broke my sainted mother's heart when I told her I'm dropping out in my junior year because I'm in a band that's making some money. So I'm just going to save up enough to get back on my feet, and I'll get back in classes and finish my senior year. But yeah, the rest was history on that. I did start playing in working bands, and I got in a band called Mojo Hand, which was actually one of the few bands that was playing original music at the time. And they also had management, and Ken Kinnear of what was called Albatross Productions was one of the bigger promoters in the Seattle area. He was Mojo Hand's manager. He also ended up managing Heart. He took a big pay increase on that deal, and told us we were kind of on a back burner after that in Mojo Hand. But I remembered my old friends in Yakima, and contacted Brad Sinsel, and Tony Borko was the other guitar player, also from Yakima. And those two joined me with the existing fellows that were in Mojo Hand, which was Daryl Seguenza on drums and vocals, and Mark Seidenberg on bass. And that was the TKO of the first album. It was Brad Sinsel, Tony Borko, and myself on guitars, Daryl on drums, and Mark Seidenberg on bass.
Now, were you on this long lost album that was recently released as part of the TKO box set? There was a second, I believe it was a second studio album. They don't really give specifics as to that. The songs on it are really strong.
I believe if it's the one I think it is, there were two kind of bonus albums I think on that. One of them was called TKO Round 2.
Yes.
Which were songs that would have been on the second album.
Correct.
Back to the first, we got signed by Ronald Luxemburg's Infinity Records. It was distributed by MCA and did a lot of touring. We did go out with we initially went out with the Kinks and did a lot of playing in your guys' neck of the woods. And we really learned how to face up against stuff getting thrown at you and getting yelled to get off the stage. And we later found out that anybody that opens for the Kinks, that's what happens to them. But that was our baptism by fire, and we ended up getting on some really good tours after that. One of them was with Cheap Trick. And because of our management, we also got toured quite a bit with Heart at that time. We went out with, Angel. We got to do some dates with AC/DC and got to hang a little bit with those guys when Bon was still alive. And we got to play quite a bit. And we took about 2 weeks off. They wanted the label wanted to hear our new material. We changed rhythm sections. We got Evan on bass and Bill Durham on drums and did a quick demo. And that's all it was a demo of our new songs. And they just ran 24 track at K Smith Studios, and we just played the whole thing live. And that's what it is. I'm a little embarrassed by it, but the fans love it. They were really anxious to get it out. They had been trading bootlegs for decades.
Absolutely.
Of these songs. And so, it doesn't really show me in my best light.
It's a little raw sounding, but some of the songs are really strong.
As they say, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And
the songs overall are really strong. So it's a little raw in the production.
It turns out that a lot of the Seattle grunge guys, they were among the people that were swapping cassette tapes of our songs.
Really?
From that demo. So they all knew these songs. It's like Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, it turned out was a big fan. I was walking with my wife around Green Lake in about I think it was 2010, and this punk kid almost knocks me over on the walking trail, and he was on a skateboard, and he had his helmet and had goggles on, and it's like, hey, what are you doing, man? And the guy he gets up, he took a nosedive off the trail off his skateboard, and he says, "Are you Rick Pierce?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm Mike McCready, and I listened to your album every night for 4 years."
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, well, let's talk.
All's forgiven.
We ended up doing a little song together. We did a cover of David Bowie's Cat People theme. Mm. That's out there. That should have made the box set, but it didn't.
No, that's not on there.
Isn't Mike McCready? Isn't he? Is he the guy from Pearl Jam that's the big UFO fan?
Yes.
Okay.
He has a cover band called Flight to Mars.
Okay. Yeah.
The whole one of the UFO albums. It's the one with Rock Bottom.
Okay.
Phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, what led to your departure from TKO, and how did Q5 get put together and signed to Music for Nations?
Yeah, those kind of went together. We got Infinity Records went out of business, and their whole roster was absorbed by MCA Records, and MCA just passed on us. out of all the bands that they had signed, and it was a lot of bands that Infinity had signed. We didn't make the cut. TKO didn't. I stayed with management. We were still managed by Ken Kinnear, and there was some kind of bitterness going on then, that this stuff always happens in the political stuff, and the lines were drawn, and I stayed with management with Kinnear and Brad and Evan, and at the time Bill went their separate ways. They ended up getting another drummer and another guitar player, and that was Gary Thompson on drums and Adam Baum on guitar, and they recorded what was going to be an album in Hawaii. It was the studio that was set up in Hawaii by the same person that owned the studio we had recorded TKO's Let It Roll at, Rick Kiefer. So that version of TKO went to Hawaii. I stayed back in Seattle, trying to get plugged into projects that Ken Kinnear was finding for me. None of which I'll mention here. But those guys came back from Hawaii with an album basically done, but they still felt the need of another guitar player, so they called me, and Rick, let's let bygones be bygones, and they booked the Music Source studio, which it was right in downtown Seattle, and it was also that we recorded a couple of songs that were going to be on the second TKO album, which was called In Your Face. And so I had been gone for almost 2 years. Adam did almost all the guitars, virtually all the guitars, and wrote the songs with Brad. There was one song from the Rick and Tony era that made that album called Give Into the Night. Other than that, it was all Adam Baum and Brad, and then Gary and Evan were the rest of that band. But they got me back into the band. We did record 2 songs at the Music Source, which were one called I Want to Fight, and we did a cover of Wild in the Streets that was done for a bonus track. All this time, Gary, the drummer, and Evan were also playing on the side with Floyd Rose and Scott Palmerton, also known as Jonathan K. So I'd go to rehearsal with TKO, and there was another half stack sitting there. Marshall, oh yeah, that's Floyd's rig. We're helping them out in the studio too. We were in the same studio even, so they were recording at the Music Source. TKO was at the Music Source. We were sharing the same drummer and bass player. It wasn't called Q5 yet. It was just Floyd Rose's project, along with TKO, and the songs that Floyd and Jonathan were working on got the attention of our old manager, Ken Kinnear, but still my good friend. And he and the people that worked for his management were adamant that, look, you guys need to go with Floyd and Scott. That's the happening deal. And so it was kind of a night of the long knives where we did jump ship and switch to what became Q5.
And where did the name? 2 questions: the name and the phenomenal artwork for the first album. What was the whole concept and idea between that artwork and the name of the band?
Floyd was always fascinated with science fiction, and very, very technical minded, and technology oriented, and he was actually wanted to find a neutral name that might have something to do with space, and I think he was trying to remember there's a mathematical term for the ideal position of an orbit around of two bodies in orbit, and I think it was L5 is what he was trying to remember, but he just blurted it out Q5, and we go, hey, okay, yeah, got something there, Q5. That's where the name came from. The cover is another long story because initially we signed with my former manager Ken Kinnear with his Albatross Records, and they commissioned a cover which was kind of, I have it up here. It's kind of a green affair, and it does look very science fiction, but it was voted the album got a lot of airplay in Seattle and was starting to make some waves, but we were voted the worst album cover of 1984 by the Seattle's Rocket music newspaper.
For this album cover?
No.
Oh, okay. The one that you talked. Okay. Yeah.
So it's somewhat of a collector's item now. The original art for the Albatross Records version of the Q5 Steal the Light cover. I liked it. It's an acquired taste, but Music for Nations hated it too. We got signed by Music for Nations happily because several of the critics in the British press took a liking to us, and they heard some of the demos, already knew about us, but particularly I'd say Xavier Russell with
I remember him.
Magazine was really instrumental in getting us out there, and he got us signed by Martin Hooker at Music for Nations. They commissioned the more familiar artwork for Q5. I pulled out these albums. I have to remind you, get to a certain stage of life, and I have to remember who was on these things. But yeah, that was the cover, and it was so good that I ended up using that same artist for Nightshade, and also for Suicide Squad. He did the same, did the artwork for both of those.
Because I bought this album when it came out, and I remember being a little confused by it, because I love the cover of it, but it kind of, like, between the name and the cover, kind of had the look of a prog rock band.
Right.
And then I turned it around, and the guys looked like metal guys. And seeing it came in as an import into my friend's record store. So when the imports used to come in, they weren't sealed. So I got my friend to put it on the turntable, and as soon as I heard like the first 3 songs, I was like, I'm buying that.
Right. The first 3 songs really would grab you. Hopefully, those were the freshest ones. The one thing that we hadn't mentioned, we've been talking about Floyd a lot ever since we started talking about Rick Pierce Group, because he wrote the songs with me, and but we should probably put in for non-guitar playing listeners that Floyd is the inventor of the Floyd Rose tremolo, which was popularized especially by Eddie Van Halen and just about every guitar player out of the 80s.
Yeah.
And so,
no, he's a household. Anybody that plays guitar, his name is a household name.
Yeah, it used to be a little galling that every time I'd look at my guitar, I'd look down there and there's the name of the other guy.
The other guy in the band, right? Yeah.
Because he was quite generous with guitars and hardware, and so I always got the cutting edge stuff. But when we were writing the songs for Steal the Light, he had a machine shop downstairs in his house where he was manufacturing the tremolo units. They were handmade there.
And then after that, every album you bought, when you looked at the gear, when you looked through the booklets of the gear, every Floyd Rose pickups was always, it was just like a name that you just, I don't even play guitar, and like I do.
Yeah.
I don't know who Floyd Rose is until I do that with the connection with then Q5.
Right.
And then
That's what guitar plays. Yeah. I got this new guitar. It's got a Floyd on it.
right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know the guy.
Right.
But I had to put that in. But so we were writing those songs on the in Floyd's living room, and they were making the tremolos downstairs. But he was also he produced that album as well, is writing the songs, and that's still his forte, and he's producing our current album. So he's still at it, still has the fire in the belly, which I'm happy to say.
So songs like Pull the Trigger or Missing in Action, those were songs written by who? How did some of those trademark songs from that album come about?
Well, the heaviest songs were ones that we pretty much worked on together, all set up live as a band. Some of the older ones, the kind of AC/DC style songs, were ones that were from their earlier demos.
Okay.
That were before Gary and Evan and I officially joined up with Floyd and Gary. But the first side songs, like Missing in Action was a riff I brought in. Pull the Trigger, we all put that one together in rehearsal. Lonely Lady, that was Floyd and Scott, but we wrote that it was one of the fresh, newer songs.
That's actually a song that could have fit on the follow-up album in terms of style, I thought.
Yeah, Lonely Lady, and still very popular in Europe. And it's still one that they request a lot.
Now, how did the Music for Nations, which was a European label, how did that signing come about?
It was because of our getting the attention of the British press. As I said, Xavier Russell and some others. The magazines Kerrang, especially Kerrang.
Yeah, he was a big writer in Kerrang. He did a lot for Kerrang in that time.
He's writing the liner notes for a new release of Q5 Steal the Light.
Really?
Yeah. On that's we're negotiating with Rock Candy Records to put that out, and Xavier, I'm back in touch with him, and we talk every couple of weeks now. But he's been signed to do the liner notes for that.
Nice.
Now there was a reissue of the Q5 debut that came out with a whole bunch of demo bonus tracks, some of which weren't on the album.
Yeah.
Were those outtakes, or were they proposed songs for another album, or where did they come from?
There's actually been a couple of those, the reissues with the bonus tracks, and virtually they're all just demos
from the first recording session.
Yeah.
Okay, just things that didn't make the album, so to speak. Yeah. Okay.
And now there's alternate versions of songs that were.
There's a few alternate versions, and about I think 3 songs that definitely were not on the album.
That were on the, yeah. But those were demos that. But there were 2. There was one that came out in High Voltage Records came out in the early 2000s, I think.
I think that's what I have.
And that's they did a good job of mastering that, and that's the one that we used for the digital release of it.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
Yeah, so the digital release is all was mastered as the High Voltage album.
Okay.
So if you hear it on iTunes or Spotify, that's that version, which I think is the best master of it.
Now, Rock Candy is doing something similar to this with bonus tracks, or to?
Yes.
Okay.
And probably the same bonus tracks.
Right. Okay, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question that I've always wanted to ask anybody that was in Q5: How did the monumental change in sound and direction come about from album 1 to 2? Was it record company pushed? Was it what you guys wanted? Combination of both?
You guys switched over to Polygram, right?
Yes. Well, we stayed on Music for Nations, and for Music for Nations kept the territory. So the second album was still on Music for Nations for Europe, but everywhere else in the world, it was on Squawk Polygram. That's another interesting thing, is because there were not just 2 covers to that Steal the Light album. There was at least one more. There was a Canadian version which was on Atlantic Records.
Oh, wow. So I've never seen that.
They licensed it from Music for Nations, and they did their own cover. They changed the song order.
Really?
That's another rarity that I'll sign a couple of them at festivals, and it's like, whoa, what's that? It opened with a different song. It wasn't Missing in Action. They had Missing in Action as the last song.
How could you not have Missing in Action as the first song? I mean,
that's what we all said.
Right.
Yeah.
Song pins your ears to the wall as soon as you put it on.
Well, thank you. But the stylistic change, it happened for a couple of reasons, but it was Floyd as the producer and as one of the main songwriters was trying to get us signed to a major American label. There were somewhat factions in the band because I had come from TKO. I'd come from a lot of playing live and being on the road and that sort of thing, and was less inclined to just want to be in a studio situation. So we had a little bit of a vying factions, but I think it actually came out for the best on Steal the Light. And that's why the style on Steal the Light, it's got some kind of very metal songs, but also some kind of bluesy AC/DC style songs, and I think we meshed those styles pretty well. On the second album, we did get our major. We got distributed by Polygram, but in doing that, they added a lot of keyboards and production. Another reason for that was Floyd signed a deal for his tremolo that was very lucrative. And he was able to build a state-of-the-art lavish studio in his home. So when we got in the studio, we never had a reason to leave because we owned the studio, or Floyd did. And that was part of the reason that the second album was so much more commercial sounding.
And I got to be honest, when it came out, and I like AOR music, I was not wild about it because I liked that first album so much. But I was explaining to Mark today, in the mid 80s, I was much younger, and I was really I was a metal guy. And over the years, the AOR, I'd become a huge AOR fan. So when we were going to have you on the show, I pulled this out, and I had a whole different perspective of it, where I like it actually as much as the first album because it's really a brilliant AOR album.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It's I felt very ambivalent about it, and when I went, I actually had a feeling that the fans were going to be disappointed when they heard it, and I went over to England myself and stayed with my good friend Xavier Russell. Stayed with him, and I did press for the album, and I thought I would try to kind of go out ahead of it and maybe soften the blow for people and maybe try to explain where we were going with it. And I was playing for everybody. I was playing the song When the Mirror Cracks, which is quite heavy.
Yes.
And leaving off maybe some of the more ballady things, but I tried to put our hardest rock foot forward And I did press in London at the Music for Nations office there, and I think it was 86 for the new album. But the fans, were kind of taken by surprise, and we got letters to our management where they said, here was how my top 10 bands listed, and they would say it was like number 1 AC/DC, number 2 Laws Rockets, number 3 Q5, number 4 whatever, and down the list of the current metal things. This is my new list, and it goes like 1,000,003
Right.
Slipman.
Right.
Then after that was 1,000,004 Captain and Tennille, 1,000,005 Q5.
Right.
Well, fast forward a couple years ahead, because was there a third album that was going to be recorded? And I guess from what I read, it was kind of going even be a more commercial direction, and that was kind of the end of things.
That was the end of things, and that's the basis of where Nightshade came from.
Mm. I mean, what was the direction that the label was pushing to go more commercial? When you look at the second album, how much were they trying to go even more so on the third album, or the would-be third album?
Do that, but then the parent label, I think, wanted to do that, and they wanted hits, but at the same time, Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch, they're not known for AOR. I think they wanted the hard rock. They wanted the metal. I mean, they had Metallica at the time.
Yeah.
But there were factions that wanted the more AOR sound too, and that basically Floyd wanted to keep it in the studio. Jonathan and I thought we were going to go on our own and take it in the heavy metal direction. So there was a third album. We recorded a lot of it. Many of those songs ended up on the first Nightshade album. They were the harder rock songs that Jonathan and I had been working on, and we actually recorded them with Q5, and they never made it out of the demo stage. But we did. That's when we split, and so that was about 88.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, if that came about today, it would have been more accepted, because with the passage of time, there are a lot of fans now, like the two of us, that are into hard rock and heavy metal, and also love and adore AOR. But you go back to the 80s, it was a split. You were either a metal guy or you weren't.
Yeah.
Or you were an AOR wimp. That's what they was called, the wimp wire.
Yeah.
And wimp wire and Krang. That was
exactly right. So, but there was no overlap. If there was, and even if there was overlap, you probably didn't admit to the fact you liked AOR.
Yeah.
So like today, now with the passage of time and 30, 35 years plus, I could say I like AOR as equally as much as I do heavy metal, but I couldn't say that in the 80s when I was 25. I could say it now at 65. But,
no. Yeah. In fact, Derek Oliver wrote the Wimpwire column.
That's right.
In Krang. Now he's the president of Rock Candy Records.
Right.
But you never wanted to end up on Wimpwire if you had pretentious.
Right. If you were a metal guy, you're right. It was, and vice versa. And the guys that were hardcore wimps, they kind of scoffed at heavy metal. Like it was like, dirt under their feet.
Right. And not real musicians at all. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd like to take you to the beginning of Nightshade, especially the first album, which to me is an all-time classic. How did that lineup come about? Well, we know there's two members from Q5, but how did you put that band together?
I put the band together. I really had I had the demos of the harder songs that would have been on the third album for Q5. I found a young, proficient drummer, Jeffrey McCormick, and Tony Magnelli on bass, and I really wanted just try to do the one guitar, just a 4-piece format for Nightshade, and do the. We basically wanted to stay true to the steal the light ethic, or to that style, and we hit it as a 4-piece. Consequently, we sounded heavy metal just by virtue of that. We didn't have any keyboards. It was an article of faith that we didn't have any keyboards, and we just blasted it and tried to do a metal album. I even have this one because I could see that Somebody's Watching You would have been on the third Q5 album. Last Train Home would have been on the third Q5 album. Those two. Let's see. The song "Dead of Night" would have been on that album. Those are the ones. The rest of them we wrote for this album.
Into Nightshade was a new song.
Into Nightshade was a new song.
Yeah, that's a great song. And I wanted to ask you about my particular favorite song on the album, "Somebody's Watching You," which is the first time I heard that song, I flipped.
Cool. Yeah, we actually did a video that surfaced. Just
I've never seen that.
I haven't even seen it more than twice, maybe. But it's out there, just like everything else now in the YouTube days. There's a video for "Somebody's Watching You," but yeah, that was definitely the production number, and that did start out as a Q5 song, and we embellished that quite a bit and added a lot to it. But that was really Jonathan's production piece.
It's got like that real like Savatage-y type of vibe to it, that. The only song on the album, Drop D.
Right.
It's got that real like nasty guttural, sound with a great hook.
Yeah, and we pulled that off pretty good live. That was a centerpiece of our live show, and Nightshade did actually continue to play a lot, which was doing something in Seattle, because we're talking like 91, 92. We were about the only people trying to do that kind of music in Seattle at the time. Everything had gone over to grunge. Mm. The plus side of that was when a national band did come through, we were the only choice. So we got to do a lot of big shows. For instance, Savatage.
You played with them, really?
In Seattle, yeah. That was a real honor.
So the other two albums by Nightshade, they came out a little bit more spaced in time. Could you tell us about those two albums?
That's been my modus operandi.
It seems that way.
If it's been less than 7 years, it just hasn't been properly aged.
You want to go into winemaking, you would be...
Right, exactly. Yeah, I will release no album before it's time.
Right. Either that or join Def Leppard, right?
Right. But it was a matter of finding labels to help us put it out, which I was able to do. And we did continue to get people to fund our recording. We after we were Music for Nations was the first album, and then they pretty much went away. The second album we got signed by a small American indie called Delinquent Records. They ran out of money, and I was able to get a German label to put us out on Hellion Records, and Hellion did the third Nightshade album as well. And they incidentally produced festivals in Germany, and that was a good platform for us to go and play. So that got us started on doing something like touring again.
And what brought about the reformation of Q5. I believe that was signed to Frontiers Records.
Yes. Evan joined Nightshade. I had tapped Evan when we initially formed Nightshade, and he declined. Just didn't want to play at all for a while. He was setting up a business, and so he didn't. So we went elsewhere and got Tony Magnelli, and after that Joel Weishart on bass, and then on drums Frankie Rongo from New Jersey replaced Jeffrey McCormick, and has been a stalwart ever since. He's the current drummer in Rick Pierce group, and when Q5 initially reformed, it was done because the promoters we had already been flying to Germany just about every summer to play as Nightshade, and when Evan got in the band, the promoters were noticing, well, we've got three out of 5 Q5ers here. People still want Q5, so let's have you do a Q5 set. And so we were just Nightshade. We were 4-piece, but they billed us as Q5 because we had Evan, Jonathan, and myself in the band, along with Frankie on drums. And we did shows as Q5, just doing an all Q5 set and doing whatever I could do as far as a one guitar arrangement of Lonely Lady. I used a harmonizer for that. I don't think it sounded too bad, but that's what gave them the idea. And they said, well, look, why don't you just call it Q5?
Yeah.
So we did. We were invited to play the Sweden Rock Festival in 2014. That went so well that we decided to make another go of it. We got signed by Frontiers. I had an old friend of mine. It's actually he toured with Izzy, my current bass player, and Rick Van Zant. He's the current lead guitar for Metal Church.
He's been there a while at Metal Church. Yeah.
Yeah, and he great guitar player. But I got him to come on board with Q5 for Sweden Rock. So that was a fun deal. And so we were back to the 2 guitar sound, and were able to do the.
Oh, that's who the other. Because I was watching some of the videos, and one of the videos was shot from the side of the stage. You couldn't really even see
Yeah.
It was
The
really
other
weird.
guitar at Sweden Rock was Rick Van Zant.
Okay.
Great guitar player, yeah. And Dennis Turner eventually took the permanent spot to take Floyd's place. Floyd was asked to come and do it, but he declined. He didn't want to go to all the work of getting in playing shape again.
Mm.
But at that time we had started working on our at that time it was a side project. It turned into my main project.
Nice. And how did that album do with Frontiers? Would you say it was a disappointment, or you were happy with it?
They would have done another album, but there was dissension in the band, and I don't even know what happened between myself and Jonathan. There was just about a year where we'd show up and not talk. He wouldn't take my phone calls, and so you'd have to talk to him to find out what happened there. But Frontiers wanted another record, and it could have happened, but it just didn't. And that's by that time I had gone off with Floyd to start Rick Pierce group.
Right. Yeah.
Because I thought personally that Frontiers kind of homogenized the band. The way the videos were shot, there wasn't like a lot of imagination put. I thought it could have been put forward a little bit on a bigger scale. I mean, I don't know what budgets are with a label like that, but the videos were very like bland.
Yeah, the budgets were totally adequate. And that was maybe a source of some of the dissension. The budgets were adequate. This is a little inside baseball. I don't usually talk about this this stuff. But I think that I wrote most of the music on the album, so I'm not going to downgrade the album at all or the music. But I think we really could have benefited with a producer, and I wanted to use a producer. Even Floyd would have been a good producer, but
yeah, I mean that's part of where I was going with it. It could have been. I think it could have been a lot more in general.
I wrote them, but they were too damn long.
Right.
But yeah, we could have benefited with a producer. Now the producer I had in mind that I promoted to do it, that I was hoping to, I actually want to work with him again, but you wouldn't have thought of him for doing a metal album because he was much better known for punk and grunge, because Jack Endino. But he and I had a great working relationship. He had recorded the Suicide Squad side project I did with Brad Sensel in the late 80s. And so we go back that far, and I really was happy with the way he recorded drums and guitars. So grunge be damned, I wanted to work with Endino again. And I didn't prevail on that, but maybe someday still. Of course, I'm happy with the current producer.
So where can people keep up to date with you on the new album coming out, the Rick Pierce Group album? Is there a website?
Yeah, website is rickpierceguitar.com, alternately rickpiercegroup.com. Either one of those will get you to our website and access to the music, plus the whole catalog. That's the one semi-smart thing I did was when all the rights for Q5 and Nightshade reverted back to the original owners, to the band, I got them out digitally, and so ever since about 2007, we've had official distribution, digital distribution. So the whole catalog is also there between TKO, Q5, Nightshade, Suicide Squad, and then the Rick Pierce Group. It's all available in digital format on the website.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll certainly plug that on our website, and when we get this posted.
Wonderful.
Anything else, Tom?
It's a pleasure, Rick. Thank you. You answered a lot of questions for me that I've always wanted to know about the insides of Q5.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much for the kind words, Tom and Mark.
Great. Well, everybody, Rick Pierce from the Rick Pierce Group. Look for that in early 2025. And Rick, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, fellas. Rock on. New Jersey.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.